Good afternoon to you. It's 5:06 now. News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we are making sense of the news. Coming up, Senator Ron Johnson will be with us from the great state of Wisconsin, who's at a Senate hearing this morning investigating, the assassination attempt on President Trump on July 13th. There's still so many unanswered questions, and the Biden administration very reticent to give us all the details. Ron Johnson joins us coming up. You can join us at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. The campaign is, of course, heating up. Kamala Harris doing some trips around the country. They're keeping her very close. They're keeping her on a tight leash. They do not want Kamala Harris to be in front of microphones or near microphones as she attempts to talk to voters. I saw a video today of a campaign event. They're trying to keep the cameras away from her. They really don't want her in any unscripted moments. Obviously, the Trump campaign would be very excited to have her speak in an unscripted way. And despite the goofiness you're seeing in the press, President Trump quite obviously wants a debate. He'd like it to be on more favorable terms than just handing it over to some goofy left-wing network. But the reality is that in the end, he's going to settle for whatever he can get. He wants that woman on a stage with him, and he wants to debate her because he knows what it's like when she runs her mouth. Doesn't usually end well. I just played for you the school bus audio a few minutes ago. She has no idea where she's starting or where she's ending or how she's getting there. It's typical. And isn't it amazing that they have such a concentration of people like this in the Biden administration, whether it's Joe Biden himself or Karine Jean-Pierre or Kamala Harris? They do not specialize in sentences. That is not a thing that they do well at all. President Trump is out today with a brand new advertisement that he's airing all over the place and spending a lot of money to do. And it seeks to define Kamala Harris for the American people, and this is what it sounds like.
I'm Donald J. Trump, and I approve this message.
This is America's border czar, and she's failed us. Under Harris, over 10 million illegally here. 250,000 Americans dead from fentanyl. Brutal migrant crimes. And ISIS now here.
Do you have any plans to visit the border? You haven't been to the border.
And I haven't been to Europe. I mean, I don't understand the point that you're making.
Kamala Harris, failed, weak, dangerously liberal.
Failed, weak, dangerously liberal. Dangerously liberal. So those are the keywords right now that they're running with. Clearly, an effective ad, and it is policy based. For those among us who were worried that this wouldn't be policy focused, well, there you go. This big ad that they're running right now, this big ad campaign, policy focused, focusing on all of her varying weaknesses, especially over these last few years. It's funny, the left's position right now is to try and cast the right, and specifically Donald Trump and JD Vance. Oh, they're weird. They're weird. And they've been sending this talking point out. And again, what they're trying to do is fundamentally they're using a teenage girl's line of attack to try and diminish someone. It's not involved, it's not really, there's no logic here. It's just simply like, ooh, you creep me out, you're weird. And the hope is that they leave people with this impression and drive them away from a guy that has become increasingly popular among the American people, and that's Donald Trump. His presidential campaign very much has appealed to all sorts of demographics that you don't normally see candidates from either party appeal to. And here is, Tom Elliott over at Grabian is so good at this. He put together a supercut of all of these Democrats mouthing the talking points throughout the media that they've been delivered by the DNC.
Some of what he and his running mate are saying, well, it's just plain weird.
These guys are just weird. That's who they are. As weird and creepy as JD Vance.
Super weird idea from JD Vance.
Yeah, it's quite weird. They're just plain weird.
Just plain weird.
Just plain weird.
That stuff is weird. They come across weird, and then they start being weird. Yeah, they're weird.
Being a really weird.
He's such a weirdo.
Donald Trump and his weirdo running mate are weird. Deeply and profoundly weird.
They are weird.
These Republicans just being weird, it's just weird. It's really weird.
Republican weirdness goes even deeper.
He said a lot of things that are weird, a weird style that he brings.
Pete Buttigieg, the guy who was just on a white dudes for Kamala segregated Zoom call last night advocating that men get their children aborted for liberty.
Weird policies. Let's start with the weird thing, because it is a thing.
Just plain weird.
What was weird was talking about Diet Mountain Dew. Who drinks Diet Mountain Dew?
You ever seen the guy laugh? That seems very weird to me that an adult can go through 6.5 years of being in the public eye. If he has laughed, it's at someone. Now,
is that Tim Walz? That's that's Governor Tim Walz saying that. I've seen Trump laugh a lot. I guess in the bubble you exist within, you haven't seen it.
With someone. That is weird behavior.
Weird and cultish.
These are weird people on the other side.
He kind of doubled down on his weird ideas.
I think weird is
Weird and cultish, they all repeat in unison.
probably generous.
Simply weird.
These guys are just plain weird.
Vance as weird?
You know, as the campaign said, weird.
It really is just plain weird.
JD Vance, plain weird.
Anyway, I'll stop. Tom put together so much audio there. There's another, 43 seconds of that. But it's the same thing. They just keep repeating the same word over and over again because that's how obedient they are. That's how compliant they are to these talking points. Democrats write the news obediently repeats it. Weird, 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 weird. Weird. Never mind, forget weird. The left is a freak show. A freak show. They're such a freak show that you couldn't actually hold a freak show anymore and make any money off of it. It used to be. It was a great tradition around the planet. Right here in the United States of America, the traveling circus, the freak show. You could see the bearded woman. You pay a little bit of money. You go inside the tent. Nowadays, you see them on your TV screen. Now we have Rachel Levine, the health admiral. It's a dude dressed as a woman, pretending to be an admiral, pretending to be all sorts of things, in charge of some aspect of the federal government's posture towards health. I'm not even really quite certain what aspect he's in charge of, but we're told that he's in charge. Now we have men posing topless on the South Lawn, taking photos, covering their fake breasts, and celebrating how great it is to be at the White House. Right? How many men in dresses pictures have we seen out of this White House? We've seen a lot of those. We've seen a great deal of those. We had Sam Brinton, the spent fuel rod nuclear waste disposal guy who describes himself as non-binary. He looks like a fancy Matt Damon, bald. And he's stealing women's luggage at airports and then dressing in the clothing that he stole, taking Instagram photos of it. And the posture here is, well, JD Vance is weird. He was a Marine. JD Vance is weird. He grew up somewhere that's not LA, New York, or DC. How weird of him. How about that? So this is what they're doing. And because the media plays along with it, because they all sing from the same hymnal, from the same sheet of music, their hope is that they can be as successful as they have in the past in gaining traction on these ridiculous invented scandals. That JD Vance needs to be held accountable. So JD Vance, apparently in 2016 and prior, he had some harsh words to say about Trump. That he wasn't fully on board with Trump in the past. He was critical of him. Okay. But so were a lot of people. In fact, a lot of people whose views have been converted by Trump, courtesy of his successes in the first term. And now, of course, by looking at the comparison between what would you prefer? Would you prefer a Trump presidency or a Biden presidency? Do you remember National Review had a huge issue against Trump? All sorts of people who now love Trump and are very supportive of him were on the cover of that magazine. It's kind of infamous. You can go back and look at it. It's kind of fun, actually, to go through each of the names and be like, actually, that person's with Trump. And Trump has this kind of hilarious relationship with each of those people now. They're like, you used to be against me. And they're like, you're right. I used to be against you. No mas. But that's way back in 2016. If you can believe that, that's 8 years ago now. 2016, 8 years ago. And so what do we have right now? Well, the left, the media, they're saying, oh, JD Vance, he doesn't like Trump. 8 years ago, he said this. Let's hold him accountable for this position. How could he flip-flop on this? How could he say he's with Trump now? What a phony, right? Or they attack him for anything, writing about his life in his book. They're attacking him for that. Well before he joined the world of politics. Okay, so these guys, as my friend Jim Antle's pointing out today, these guys can be held accountable for positions they took back way back in 2016 or wrote in their books. But we're not allowed to look at Kamala's record from 4 years ago, We're not allowed to take a basic inventory of Kamala Harris's time as vice president over just the last 3.5 years. No, of course not. Of course not. There's some stories today as some of these news outlets realize that this honeymoon phase for Kamala may not last forever, and they're going to have to figure out what to do next. The New York Times, why the Kamala Harris of 4 years ago could haunt her in 2024. This guy, Reed Epstein, is on the byline here. This piece out just yesterday. When she ran for president the first time, Kamala Harris darted to the left as she fought for attention from the Democratic Party's liberal wing. After she dropped out, social and racial justice protests swept across the country in summer of 2020. And Ms. Harris joined other Democrats in supporting progressive ideas during what appeared to be a national realignment on criminal justice. These are all euphemisms for she made the country less safe. That's what they're saying. One presidential cycle later, with Vice President Harris less than a week into another race for the White House, video clips of her old statements and interviews are being weaponized as Republicans aim to define her as a left-wing radical who is out of step with swing voters. Isn't this great? So Republicans are pouncing on video footage of Kamala Harris's positions. How dare we pounce? Former President Donald J. Trump is calling out her past positions and statements at his rallies. And on Monday, his campaign began reserving time for television advertisements that are likely to resurface videos of Ms. Harris. That's the ad I just played for you at the top. The archive is deep, said Brad Todd, a Republican strategist and ad maker who is working with David McCormick, the Republican Senate candidate in Pennsylvania, among other campaigns. Quote, we will run out of time before we run out of video clips of Kamala Harris saying wacky California liberal things. I'm just not sure that the rest of this campaign includes much besides that. That's the Republican position here, and rightfully so. And rightfully so. And they get to a little bit of how Kamala Harris has flipped and flopped already. She is now claiming, she had previously claimed that she was going to ban fracking. We're banning fracking. No more natural gas in America. Screw those jobs. Screw your energy. Screw your ability to thrive and succeed in the country, having cheap, available energy. She's now saying that she's pro-fracking all of a sudden. After saying it was just 3.5 years ago she was against fracking, now she's for fracking. She also said at the time that she was ready to abolish immigration and customs enforcement. She was thinking about doing that. You know, it's time to think about that. We should get rid of immigration enforcement in the country, she said, which, by the way, would be consistent with the Biden administration's policies over these last few years. She called the idea of adding more police officers, quote, wrong-headed thinking back then. We shouldn't have more cops. Let the criminals run rampant. She entertained the idea of allowing felons to vote because she's convinced if you're a felon, you're a Democrat. And then she said she supported a mandatory buyback program for guns. That's another way of saying forced confiscation. Mandatory buyback is the government will take your gun from you. That's what mandatory buyback is. And they'll give you some measly amount of money. Here's some compensation for us robbing you of your liberty. And she called for the elimination of private health insurance. No more private health insurance. So we'll go to a full-blown socialist healthcare system under Kamala Harris. That was just a couple years ago. So here's what the New York Times says she's doing now. In addition to changing her position on fracking, campaign officials said she now backed the Biden administration's budget request for increasing funding for border enforcement, no longer supports a single-payer health insurance program, and she's echoed Mr. Biden's call for banning assault weapons, but not a requirement to sell them to the federal government. So get in while the getting's good. You can get your assault weapons now before Kamala Harris bans the rest of them. So she's running away from Kamala Harris from just 3.5 years ago. And I'm supposed to sit here and judge Trump for a program. You see today, he's distancing himself yet again from Project 2025. I think he said, what did he say? That he's happy if it's, he didn't say it, but his campaign said they'd be happy with the demise of Project 2025. Saying they have nothing to do with that. They're taking the left's attacks on it too seriously. Like, stop caring so much what the New York Times editorial page thinks. Just forget that garbage. That's like the worst barometer of how to run a presidential campaign. But the left is saying, oh, he needs to own these positions. He needs to own all of these suggestions from conservatives. They belong to him. Really? And Kamala Harris doesn't have to own her entire vice presidency? She doesn't have to own her 2020 presidential campaign? She doesn't have to own anything she's ever done before? No, of course not. It's 5. All right, to the phones. Joe in Atlanta, line 1. Joe, good afternoon, sir. You're on the Vince Coglianese Show.
Hi, Vince. How are you?
I'm doing good, Joe. What are you thinking?
Well, listening to all this mess with the weirdo stuff and all that, and how, JD Vance is a Marine and the other person is not a Marine, we'll say.
Mm-hmm.
But the weirdos, I'm thinking, why not put it back on their face and we'll call it Weirdos for Trump as a new bumper sticker?
Like a deplorables move.
Exactly.
Yeah. You know something? I got to say, the reality here is like the right's already dunked on this into oblivion. It's hilarious. The guys online, they all mobilized over the weekend and were instantly mocking this whole oh, JD Vance is a weirdo. Because now I'm seeing posts everywhere. Just stuff like, the Last Supper blasphemy from Friday night from the Olympics. People are posting that picture and then they just write JD Vance is a weirdo above it. And it's just, it's the best. It is perfect. In fact, I just saw somebody shared a picture of Chuck Schumer flipping a raw burger on the grill. You know how these Democrats pretend they know how to grill? Chuck Schumer flipping a raw burger, and above it says JD Vance is a weirdo. It's perfect. It's pitch perfect. The right is doing a great job just absolutely dunking this into the earth, Joe. But I like where your head's at, which is like, fine, whatever, attack us. You guys are the freaks.
Yeah, weirdos for Trump. Just go with it. Yeah.
Weirdos for Trump. All right, Joe. I'll look for your car out there, brother. Thanks, man. Appreciate the call. I'll put the bumper sticker on. Hey, coming up, Senator Ron Johnson's going to be here in just moments. We're going to talk to him about that testimony today from the acting director of the Secret Service, from a deputy director at the FBI. They came loaded with some answers about the events of July 13th. But boy, there are still so many persistent questions. And when is someone going to actually be fired? Yeah, I know. That Secret Service lady resigned, but that's nothing. That's just the beginning. That's ahead.
Does the Secret Service use encrypted communications at events?
On our radio nets, we do, sir.
Are those memorialized? Are those saved?
The radio traffic from Butler, we did not have recordings.
Do you normally?
Not on the road outside of D.C. or outside of a presidential or vice presidential stop.
So communications between Secret Service agents will not be available like we've gotten the communications from local law enforcement?
I'm sorry, Senator.
So we're not going to be able to get those communications. You didn't save them.
No, sir.
Yeah. Secret Service Acting Director Ronald Rowe testifying today before the United States Senate alongside an FBI Deputy Director Paul Abate. Joining us now to talk about what he's learned is the senator's voice you just heard. Senator Ron Johnson of Wisconsin joins us on the phone. Sir, good to have you back with us.
Well, Vince, good to be back.
I watched so much of the hearing and I thought it was productive. But boy, I was frustrated by how much more we have to learn and how reticent these guys are to give it to you, sir.
Well, it's interesting that you found it productive. I found it really quite unproductive, other than the fact that we had our Democrat chairs pressing him to make sure that we get the transcribed interviews with the Secret Service personnel in days, not weeks. So that was good.
Yeah.
I'm not sure I learned anything. I saw some new photos that, truthfully, we should have seen within a couple of days of the assassination attempt. What we do know of what happened in Butler is primarily come from local law enforcement. So that's why I published my preliminary findings within a few days, because I was trying to encourage, more people to come forward, more whistleblowers from the agencies to come forward, but also be an example to the FBI and Secret Service in terms of how transparency will help them rather than hurt them. But they're not picking up on that because it is so ingrained in the federal agencies that they, with impunity, can give the big middle finger to the American public and Congress.
Yeah.
They just do it with impunity. And so it's just ingrained in them. And it's very sad because, as Senator Rick Scott pointed out, when he had the tragedies in Florida as governor, they had daily and sometimes multiple briefings per day to let the public know what they found out. And again, it's not perfect information. It's incomplete. It's preliminary, but the public understands that. They'd rather know this. And again, they're all concerned about conspiracy theories, right? Well, the way to prevent conspiracy theories from taking hold and spreading is give people the information that you know.
Every local community knows this. If a child goes missing, you have the police hold routine press conferences on where the kid is or what the investigation's leading to. In this case, you've got a presidential candidate, former president of the United States, shot in the head. They should be doing press briefings on an hourly basis, giving us updates.
It just shows how correct our founding fathers were in terms of their basic premise for this nation, which is government close to the governed, where it's more efficient, it's more effective, it's more accountable. You know, you've outsourced so much government to the federal government. It doesn't fix problems; it basically exacerbates them, and it's not honest. It's not transparent with the American public. It's really a shame. That's got to change.
Let me give you an example of something that I learned today. Perhaps you already knew this, but here's the FBI Deputy Director Paul Abate. He gave specific time frames on when those local police saw the shooter on the roof, when they radioed it in, and how soon after the shots started being fired. Here it is.
At approximately 6:11 p.m., a local police officer was lifted to the roof by another officer, saw the shooter, and radioed that he was armed with, quote, a long gun. Within approximately the next 30 seconds, the shots were fired.
30 seconds is a tremendous amount of time between that radio call and the shots being fired. Are we any closer to knowing why the Secret Service didn't get notified to rush the stage?
Yeah, we've known that since I issued my preliminary findings that showed that all the communications were siloed. So the county SWAT and sniper teams were on different channels from the county patrol officers who are on a different channel from the encrypted channel of the Secret Service. It's all being funneled through the Butler County Comm Center and then have to be relayed. But no, honestly, I laid that timeline out. I updated that timeline today. The specific time in terms of that law enforcement officer hoisted up to that roof, that was a little bit more detailed to that.
Yep.
But you're right. I mean, I've gone through, I actually gave him about 15 seconds, but from when the assassin, when Crooks pointed the rifle at the officer, and of course, naturally, the guy's going to duck down, right? He's hoisted up there. Was he on somebody's shoulder? So he drops to the ground. That doesn't give him much time to radio it in, especially when they're on separate communication silos. Sure. But it gives Crooks enough time to get over the ridge of that roof where he would be visible, aim, and get the first shot obviously was the best aim shot. Everything else, flew wide of the mark, apparently, obviously killed other people.
Yes.
But again, we knew from Roe's hear briefing that the way he described it is, Crooks got up over that ridge, fired off 3 shots, then dropped down. Then came up again to take the additional 5 shots. That's when the Secret Service apparently acquired him and took their shot. But again, Roe didn't even go through that in the hearing.
You're right.
Tillis, later on, he had more time. I had so many questions I wanted to ask. I only got 5 minutes. I would have gone through that timeline. But, Tillis did the best job of extracting exactly what happened because, Roe just wasn't being clear.
No.
And by the way, he didn't answer my question. I asked him, there's a discrepancy. We heard from local law enforcement the Secret Service did not attend the 9 a.m. security briefing. In his testimony, he said the Secret Service was at the site briefings. But then when I asked him the question, he said, well, no, our sniper teams briefed them. Okay, that's not answering my question. So there was an awful lot of that equivocating, not being very clear in his answers, which, again, just makes people suspicious.
Well, here's another big piece. I didn't hear him say, and I think he basically confirmed that this hasn't happened, that he has placed anybody on administrative leave. One would assume that even if you're not going to say that somebody's guilty of wrongdoing, you at least put on administrative leave everybody who is responsible for the security arrangements in Butler. Has the Secret Service done that, to your knowledge, in any capacity?
No, and that's really what fired up Josh Hawley. I mean, that fire exchange didn't have to happen. If he knows the chain of command. I mean, he knows up front who would actually approve that site plan. They know that up front. So at a minimum, you can say, okay, until we investigate this, you're on a leave of absence. You're not going to be in charge anymore of this thing. But again, Marsha Blackburn, in her questioning, pointing to an email from a Secret Service whistleblower, sounded like it's public, but just said, this whistleblower said Secret Service is in its CYA mode. And it sure seems that way. So again, Acting Director Roe was more forthcoming in the briefing than certainly Director Cheadle was, but he's got a long way to go. Again, Peters pressed him. We need those transcribed interviews. We need those people made available to us in days, not weeks. The proof being the pudding, whether he makes that happen, because that's where we'll be able to drill down this. Again, what's so frustrating to me is the things he couldn't answer or wouldn't answer, they should have known literally within days, for sure. I mean, and the public should know these things as well. We shouldn't be having to ask these questions. This information should already have been given to us.
He was doing something that Kim Cheadle did in her testimony. He was obfuscating the extent to which the Secret Service, the Biden administration, has turned down President Trump's campaign's request for additional resources. He was saying, well, we didn't turn anything down for Butler. Like, no, I didn't ask you that. Why are you changing the subject to Butler, Pennsylvania specifically? We want to know broadly, have you been turning down these Trump administration requests? What if anything, did we learn today about this, Senator?
That he was obfuscating. So, I mean, there are news reports. I mean, there are, reports that detail made specific requests for Mar-a-Lago. So I asked him specifically about Mar-a-Lago because, that would be a specific answer,
right? Or
a specific question looking for a specific answer. I didn't really get an answer on that. So Ted Cruz really pressed her on that as well. You couldn't find out what is the size of the details, and then shouting match ensued from that one. But again, none of these things should have had these shouting matches. All this information should have already been made available to us.
Yeah.
Here's the size of a presidential detail. Here's the size of a vice president. Here's the size of a presidential candidate. Here's the size of a former president. Compare them. I mean, there's all this information out on the internet that people were taking off the Trump detail for Dr. Jill Biden. What's the truth? If that's untrue, tell us what the truth is. They're not doing that. So again, that's why these rumors continue to fly. And with each passing day, without those being answered, those rumors seem more credible.
This guy, Ronald Rowe, who was the second in command, now he's the acting director of the Secret Service. In the wake of July 13th, when all these questions were arising about Kim Cheadle's leadership at the Secret Service, he was defending her in public. He was issuing all these statements about how she's got toughness and intelligence and strategy. Those were his words. Defending her, and she did not deserve a defense given the catastrophic failure of that agency. Do you think it's possible that he's the wrong guy for this job?
It's very possible. Where did the buck stop? I mean, was Director Cheadle aware of these things? Did she make the decisions? Did he make the decisions? Did somebody underneath him make the decisions that he was aware of or not aware of? Again, these are basic questions.
Yeah.
Specifically Butler, he should answer. But again, he knew the questions were coming because the rumors are out there. How many times has the Secret Service denied specific requests from President Trump's detail? I mean, you ought to know that.
Yeah.
And you also ought to know exactly why the Secret Service spokesman lied when he said they were never turned down, and then the Washington Post and New York Times write articles that, yeah, they were. The requests were made, they've been turned down. And then all of a sudden they turned. Well, he couldn't give us an explanation for that.
Right. And so, that guy still has his job, that spokesman.
Of course they do.
Yeah. Let me ask you about another piece of all of this. The FBI is investigating the shooting, and of course, you had Paula Bate there today to testify about some of the findings. Part of this apparently is that they're going to talk to President Trump. They're going to have a victim interview with President Trump. The FBI claims that President Trump has agreed to this. I think this is a bad idea, Senator. I don't think that President Trump should actually meet with the FBI, given the FBI's history of sabotaging the Trump campaign during elections with briefings. I'm asking this question of you specifically because the same thing has happened to you, quite famously. You and Senator Grassley had a meeting with the FBI in August of 2020, and they used that simply as a predicate to suggest that the Hunter Biden saga was Russian disinformation. Do you think President Trump should meet with the FBI to do a, quote, victim interview?
Well, he certainly ought to have an attorney present when they do that interview. I mean, he shouldn't trust the FBI. I don't think there's probably anything nefarious about that. It's probably something they routinely do. But it would be wise for him to have an attorney and be on his guard.
Yeah, I think you're totally right. But you never know. I can't underestimate the FBI and their shenanigans here. But they say that they're going to have him in for a witness interview. So you think it's okay, but so long as he has an attorney present?
Yeah, he should have an attorney present. But again, it's a sad reality that none of us can trust the FBI. And again, it's not our fault. It's not like we're suspicious. We have every legitimate reason not to trust the FBI.
Yeah.
And, now the Secret Service, because, they've lied to us. They haven't been forthcoming. They're not forthright.
Senator Johnson, one last question for you on July 13th and what you're gathering on it. The local police, we understand, have radio communications and the stuff that we were talking about when they called out that there was a gunman on that roof. Will we, the American public, get a chance to hear that local police audio soon?
Well, I will say that our committee, and I'm part of a joint committee investigation now, so the committee will have to decide when to release these things, but we got the written transcript of those. And, a lot of it's chatter and a lot of noise in there, but there's some pretty interesting information. One thing our staff learned when they went down to Butler on Friday was that at 5:45, the pictures taken of the shooter, taken at 5:14, so 5:45, those were relayed to a Secret Service sniper. He acknowledged their receipt. So a Secret Service sniper had the picture of Crooks, knew his location of the AGR building 26 minutes before the shots were fired. So I'm assuming that those snipers have good binoculars, good scopes. They ought to be scanning every inch of that AGR building in the interim. And that's why we need to talk to them. What did they do with that information?
Yes.
We still don't know which sniper team took the shot. We're pretty sure it's the one that wasn't obstructed by the trees. Apparently one of them had an obstructed view. So probably the other one. We don't know who the sniper was. Again, we need to talk to those people to get these questions answered.
Totally. And all of the people who were on the ground, the Trump supporters who were pointing up at Crooks on the roof, saying he's on the roof, I just want to remind people, they were also outside the security perimeter and had a clear line of sight to President Trump. This is a very bizarre event where there was a huge crowd of people who had a direct line of sight to President Trump who hadn't gone through any security checks, sir.
Yeah, again, setting up the perimeter, I think, is just stupid, okay? That's indefensible. But it also does, to a certain extent, explain why maybe Crooks wasn't taken quite so seriously. There are a bunch of people milling around, okay? What differentiates him? They didn't see a gun literally until, probably seconds before the shots were fired. I think the first person saw him with a gun, in terms of law enforcement, was that local law enforcement that was hoisted up there. Crooks turns the gun toward him. He drops down to save his own life.
Right.
And shots were fired at least within 30 seconds, if not 15 seconds. So, again, so local people are shouting at people, but, again, they don't have a direct line to the secret security snipers either. So there certainly was a breakdown in communication. The siloed communication is a problem. Listen, it is a difficult issue. You can't have everybody on the same channel all the time. It's just a cacophony of sound, but you have to have an emergency channel or a way to break in with this is serious. Everybody pay attention.
Yeah, and it's somebody's job in that command center to pass that information along rapidly, and they didn't do it. We know that. That's crazy. Senator Johnson, thank you as always for digging into this. Look forward to talking to you again soon. Yeah, Joe Biden was in Texas yesterday trying to gut the United States Supreme Court, gave a big speech on the subject. He got back to the White House last night, and a reporter asked him, hey, when are you going to campaign for Kamala?
When are you going to go on and campaign for the vice president?
Well, I did today.
Well, I did today, he said. He didn't do any events for Kamala yesterday. A reporter asked Kate Coringe today, what the hell was he talking about?
He was asked when he'd go campaign for Vice President Harris, and he said, well, I did today. I was wondering if there was yesterday, was there a campaign element to yesterday? Was he sort of talking broadly? I just wonder if you could help us.
So, as you know, the president gave a little. Is this when we came back at 1:15 a.m.?
Oh, it was late.
1:15 a.m. on the South Lawn. The president took a couple of your colleagues' questions.
He's not lucid at that hour.
I think he was. I did not ask him about that particular answer. My guess is he was speaking more broadly. Look. At the end of the day, I'm not going to speak for the campaign, not going to speak to the president's campaigning schedule. That is something for the campaign to speak to. But they are partners in this administration.
Nice. That's as clear as mud. That's perfect. They don't call her Coringe for nothing. She really is amazing. All right. Hey, we're going to keep tracking all of these new advertisements that Kamala and Trump are throwing at each other. That's fun. And new polls are coming out. Can the polls be trusted? We'll explore tomorrow on the Vince Coglianese Show. The great one, Mark Levin, is up next here on the legendary WMAL.